Hello, hello, everyone. All right, well, we've got a Bible study to do. Let us see here. What color? It's been days. Lots of days. It's almost been an entire week since I've been on here. I'm going to lower this a little bit. Maybe that's better. Not sure. Go like this. That looks more level. All right, so what did we do? Pilate, they handed him over because of... Okay, I think we're in verse 16. It's been a while. So, Mark 15:16. Then the soldiers led him away into the hall called Praetorium, and they called together the whole garrison. They clothed them with purple, and they twisted a crown of thorns. Put it on his head, and that's why I was getting confused, and began to salute him. Hail, King of the Jews. Then they struck him on the head with a reed and spat on him, and bowing the knee, they worshipped him. And when they had mocked him, they took the purple robe off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him out to crucify him. Now, it mentions in verse 15, when he had delivered Jesus after he had scourged him to be crucified. And it does seem, when you go through the Gospels, Mark's kind of moving quickly through these things. But what we're seeing is basically that he was crucified. And I think Mark is actually backing up, as we look at our chronology here, going through the mocking of the soldiers of Jesus. Likely, I think, and this is where I need to go back and study some more. I don't study for these, remember. I'm just kind of going on the fly here with some of previous knowledge and notes in my Bible, which is like no notes in my Bible in this section. Fascinating. At least in Mark. But that likely the soldiers mocked him and did this stuff, before he was off to be crucified. And because he just jumps right into finding Simon the Cyrenian here in verse 21. And so Mark's hitting a few of these things as he's going and telling us the account. And likely we get from the other Gospels that Jesus was scourged and then brought out to the people again before that final decision to have him be crucified. And why was that? Well, it was because Pilate was trying to avoid crucifying Jesus. And as we mentioned before, I think it's in Luke's Gospel where we hear that the voices prevailed. That Pilate knew what the right thing to do was, but he let voices prevail. Now, Pilate, who may have had a conscience, maybe his wife had some input on this. We know a little bit about her. But the soldiers here, they're just having a great time mocking Jesus. And the Roman soldiers, they were quite brutal and cruel. And this idea of mocking a man condemned for death, of dressing him up and all this other stuff, it's pretty vicious. And you're going to find Jesus in a little while saying for the Father to forgive them, for they know not what they do. And we don't get that in Mark's Gospel. But we know he prayed for the soldiers, not right here at the point of the beating, but at the point of the crucifixion. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. And again, another thing, or actually, no, we do get this. So here's another thing with the soldiers is in verse 39, we hear one of them saying, truly this man was the Son of God. And so we watch as Jesus is being mocked, as he's being beaten, as he's being abused, again and again and again. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't fight back. He doesn't defend himself. And he prays for those who persecute him. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And in the end, at least one soldier sees all of this, the culmination of all of this. And I think that that's a statement of faith right there. Truly, this man was the Son of God, God's physical Son. And I don't know if you can say that meaning it without receiving it. Just thinking about how Jesus handles his accusers and his abusers. And in Matthew chapter 5, verse 43, it says, "You've heard it said to those of old, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." And it's worth noting that, when we read Jesus say, "You've heard it said of old, you shall not commit adultery, but I say unto you." Furthermore, it's been said, "Whoever divorces his wife, but I say unto you." And you've heard it's been said, "Eye for eye, tooth for tooth," but I tell you. There's a pattern with Jesus' use of words. And we take his words on divorce very seriously. And we take his words on looking with lust very seriously. These are go-to passages when people ask about, are these things right or wrong? I would bet you, especially if you're, a young man or whatnot, but how many times in your life you've heard people remind, "You've been heard it said to those, don't commit adultery, but I say unto you, whoever looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery within his heart." We've heard that a lot. But how many times are people reminding us, you have to love your enemies and bless? That's a proactive action. It's a verb. It's not a thing that just happens. You choose to bless. You choose to love. You're choosing to do good for those who hate you, and you are actively praying for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Those things don't get pushed in the church very often. We don't think of them as sin issues. So the question is if Jesus speaks in a certain form, you've heard it said, but now I'm telling you, Jesus is commanding, do this or don't do this. And we do the opposite of what Jesus says, well, it's sin. Well, all of this, pray for those and bless those and do good for those. It's easy to ignore those. But we have a model here with the soldiers who mock Jesus. They mock him. They spit on him. They strike him with a rod and with a reed, right? All this stuff. They crucify him. He prays for them. And eventually it does hit home with one of them. And so just following the model of our Lord with our persecutors and with the people who are mean to us and all this other stuff, it's not easy being like Jesus, is it? But that's the work that God has begun in you, and it's the work that he's promised to complete in you, to conform you into the image of his Son. That is what you have been predestined for, and that is what God is working all things to the good for. So, just a little model of how to deal with your accusers and abusers. All right, guys, it's Thursday, women's Bible study tonight. Ladies, why not? You should go. I'll see you guys around.